Today we are at Deloitte in Zurich because we would like to give you a broader outlook on the watchmaking industry, not only by having conversations with brand leaders, but additionally with opinion leaders and analysts in the watchmaking industry, like a genuine WatchAdvisor would do. So embark on our new initiative and listen to Karine Szegedi, who is in charge of Deloitte's well-known Swiss watchmaking industry report. Welcome. You can check out the Deloitte report on our website by scanning the QR code on the screen or by clicking the link in the description.
Don't forget to subscribe and to hit the bell to get our latest notifications.
So, Karine, welcome to our channel.
Thank you.
I would like to start directly with your introduction because I know she's closely involved in Deloitte's research on the Swiss watch industry, and she is a watch lover, watch collector. She has also her own podcast, Luxury on Air. So, Karine, we would like to know about you more.
Thank you, Marina, for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. I have now spent my 30th year with Deloitte here in Switzerland, where I lead consumer business and fashion and luxury. And particularly for fashion and luxury, I'm in charge of bringing out these watch studies that we do very regularly, yearly or bi-yearly. So we are passionate about the watch industry, as you said, Marina. And I think what we try to do is an independent view, a holistic view of the industry. And we are brainstorming every year on what is hot in the watch industry, what is new, what maybe the watch brands and the retailers should look out for. And we try to bring views of the industry, so the retailers, the brands and the subcontractors, but as well the consumers. Because maybe sometimes it's not exactly the same what consumers want and what brands are proposing.
Do you see certain dynamics in the Swiss watch industry, like which trends are steady, like they are there, and you see that it's developing year for year, and something which is, you would say, temporary, like coming and going?
It's funny because a lot of people say as well, it's not only a secretive industry, but it's as well an industry that is slow moving. Yeah. Because of course, we know it, the cycle of developing a new model is very long. It takes years of research, and then as well development and the assembly of a watch takes time. But then I try to look back, what have we done like 5-7 years ago, or maybe 10 years ago? What did we speak about? And we didn't speak about pre-owned. We didn't speak about ESG. We didn't speak about the female market of Gen Z. We did hardly introduce consumers. It was more, what is the industry thinking and what is the industry pushing? Data. Didn't speak about it. So when you look, and it was all about Swiss made, Swiss franc, and then we had cycles of, oh my God, what are the biggest risks? Availability of qualified staff, access to spare parts. Because when the industry was booming, of course, it was difficult to be able to produce enough. And then, of course, then you had the pandemic. So, oh, wow, geopolitics, threats, macroeconomic events suddenly became key, because before macroeconomy did not influence so much. Strong Swiss franc has been here quite a lot, disappeared a bit, but is now very strongly back. And we've introduced now especially geopolitics and other political unrest to see if that is influencing the consumer as well. Yeah. Because one thing is, of course, it influences the pricing of the brands, the supply chain. But the question that we introduced a couple of years ago is well about, is the consumer influenced by geopolitical events? Are they continuing to buy? Another question that we introduced, I like a lot, is the security question. Unfortunately, we read more and more about security. We thought that we were secure in Switzerland, and there is a lot of risk checking in Switzerland as well, in Geneva. If security becomes a major issue, well, people, would they still buy the watches so easily? Can they still wear their watches? Or is it just you buy for investing? That triggered the question of investment. 10 years ago, nobody spoke about investing into a watch. Well, now we introduced the question, why do you buy a watch? One option is to read the time. Because 10 years ago, you needed the watch to read the time. Now, everybody equipped with smartwatches and the time everywhere. You don't need the watch anymore to read the time. So, it's funny when you look back how the industry evolved and how the object and the usefulness of the object has evolved as well.
Maybe investing, like everybody probably on our channel, of course, is passionate about watches, and we say that passion and love for the craftsmanship is the key in collecting. What is your opinion now with pre-owned market, which is developing, with this value of craftsmanship? What is changing, like in value perception of the watches, in collecting the watches? Because it's a very burning question at the moment. at least for our audience.
I mean, you have to make a difference between the pre-owned market and the primary market, of course. So we decided last year not to have a full issue of the watch study, but to do a deep dive. And one of the deep dives that we did was on the pre-owned market. And there we asked ourselves, well, how do we start talking about the pre-owned market? Where do we start? Where do we end? And in the end, we said, okay, who are the buyers? Who are the sellers? And who are the products and the platforms? Because it's these four elements that make the market. And looking at them separately gives very interesting findings as well. Of course, because the buyers, generations, don't buy the same, don't approach the pre-owned market the same. But it's a bit in parallel with, of course, pre-owned handbags, clothing, and so on. I mean, there's a really generational gap. Gender. Don't approach the pre-owned market the same way. We can talk about it as well, of course, about the availability of female watches proposed in auctions in the pre-owned market, of knowledge, collectors clubs, and all these things. So there is quite a gap. The sellers, well, in some markets where the primary market was less developed, there is a less pre-owned market because, of course, you have to have products to sell in order to have a pre-owned market. So in these countries like China, it's coming now, but it's only because there's a lot of bigger domestic market in China, for example. Then when you look at the platforms and how the brands approach this, it's so interesting. The theme, the overarching theme in pre-owned is trust. Because what you need to have a good pre-owned market and to maintain the pricing and to buy more and to be able to sell easily is trust. And who helps the trust? It's the platforms. I mean, nowadays you have a lot of platforms that give credibility on the seller, but more and more as well, give a warranty or a certification on the product. The platform might do it, they can work with different experts, but now the brands come into the game as well, and they build the trust because they give certificates. Rolex, Vacheron Constantin have done a pre-owned watch certificate. It's reviewed by themselves. Richard Mille contributes and other brands contribute. And all this brings the market up and more players, more trust and more liquid market. And that brings us back to the generation where we see that Gen Z, for example, says, well, I buy a watch. I bought a Daytona. I like it, but now I can only have 5 watches because that's my fortune and I have to sell to buy a new one. I do. And 5 years later I said, I'd like to have the same again. And I buy it again. Or I sell one to buy a new one. It's liquid. The market is there. I know exactly where, how, and so on. And I trust the seller. I trust the product. Before, when you bought for investing, you put it in a safe or you kept it for the next generation. Gen Z is more easy. It's this sharing economy. Why do I need to own things? I can just lend them or hold them for a time and then I can change and swap again.
Does it depend on the price category that Gen Z can just make this market liquid, or is it just mentality of the people?
I think both. I mean, there's so many market players that you cannot generalize. When we speak to brands and when we speak about pre-owned or as well primary market, who are their new buyers? It's a lot of the next generation inheritance that have a lot of means and that spend a lot on watches, that are passionate about watches. But what brought all these people to the watch industry is as well the boom and the flippers, and the pre-owned market, which was very high historically. A lot of young men, especially who like the adrenaline of playing and earning money with the watches, entered the market and now they stay because once you're passionate about watches, it's difficult to get out of the watch market. So several. I mean, there is the flippers before that might have a passion for watches, others that discovered the market and that enter the market, maybe have a smaller budget, but they start there. They prefer having a better known brand in the pre-owned market at a lower price than to buy it in a primary and have maybe lower reviewed brand, meaning that they can buy a higher category of watch in the pre-owned market. So that's where they enter the pre-owned market. And then you have a lot of population that just have the means and wants to invest, wants to buy talking pieces, different pieces, or investment pieces. And often they're very young. I'm very surprised when I speak to brands and I said, well, what are your new customers for the exceptional pieces? Well, very young people, below 30, below 35 that would buy these watches.
Impressive, huh? But do the brands speak the language of these younger generations, like, for example, Gen Z? Do they understand how to convert them, how to win them? What is your opinion?
Well, the brands is very large. The industry is very large as well. Findings that we have done when we looked at Gen Z studies, we looked at our Gen Z data over the years, we looked at the different buying behaviors. Even though in the study this year, brick and mortar is there to stay. And the brands as well as the consumers mostly say even in 5 years, brick and mortar will be still the main buying platform for watches because you might try it, the weight, the size, the looks, and the professional dynamics. But Gen Z, yes, they majority buy over e-commerce if they can. they might come to the store for events, for pop-ups, for expositions, for happenings, or to get the brand DNA, in the showrooms, but they not necessarily would do the buying in the shop, in the store. They like design as well a lot, looks. Price is still number one of the criteria, and they're very informed as well, because of course, you often for clothes you would go into the store, try it on, and you would buy it online. For watches, often you inform yourself online and you buy it in store. It's a bit the other way around, and they're very much informed. They're very much comparing prices, and most of them are traveling, so it's a different behavior. And of course, how do they inform themselves? I mean, they look at social media, but as well, friends are very important. Opinion leaders are very important, and new platforms. We interviewed TikTok for our study. Is that opinion leaders are not necessarily the influencers that are being paid by the brands. The opinion leaders can be a person that is very knowledgeable, very good, and speaks about a watch. But this message is not controlled by the brands, because it's the opinion leader that speaks about it, or an expert. And the brands, of course, work a lot, with Instagram and with TikTok and with social media now. But it's a different way, to put, like printed media, or you have an ambassador. Well, now you have influencers, you have bloggers, and you have the experts that can just put on, and they have 1,000 million of views. Plus, it's very instant. You have to be quick.
Yeah.
When there's a comment, you have to answer, and you have to. So it's a complete change. I mean, I spoke to brands very interestingly who said, you cannot bring out a model for Gen Z, or you can communicate with Gen Z if you think as you thought before, and if you, in our age, think about the industry and the consumer. What I had separate working groups that were made of Gen Z. I mean, different functions within the company, and they said, you know what, lock yourself into a room for a couple of weeks and come with an idea, come with a watch, come with the communication strategy, come with the way that we want to market this, and let's see how this goes. Let's just leave you in your world and don't influence with our processes, procedures. And to get out and to be able to reach a new consumer world, it sometimes requires a bit of risk.
As a woman, I cannot not to ask about ladies' watches. So, which threats do you see? How strong is the sector? What is the development of the recent years? It would be very interesting for me to hear it.
So, Marina, the future is female, which is great. Yeah, we think. I mean, we said as well. We think Gen Z, of course, is one of the future consumers,
exactly.
And then female in particular. Why? Because there is so few female buyers still in the watch industry, and as well, when we looked at what female are wearing, well, they're wearing a lot of smartwatches or no watches, unfortunately. So you have to convert them back to the nice watch industry of quartz or mechanical watches. Well, females have fortune and are inheriting, are CEOs of companies, dare to buy things themselves, are interested into watches before it might have been more jewelry. So these things are changing. But of course, the industry has to adapt, because the industry was mainly done. I mean, that's why I say secondary market auctions. What is proposed is male watches, because male watches were always the complications, my first watch that I offered myself for my 40th birthday was a male watch, because I wanted apparent complications on the dial. And there was none, or hardly none, for female. It's either, with diamonds or with nice design, but no complications. If there's nothing offered, well, the female are not in the market. And even in the watch brands overall, there was less models that were being offered, and specifically for female. What we see as well is that if you want females to react, maybe you have to think female first, not feminize something what was masculine at the beginning. The boutiques were more for men. When you have a pool table or a motorbike or a sports car, might not be so attractive.
Yeah.
We see that female like to be like us about a coffee table rather than a real transactional table, where it's more transaction, should be more a conversation or a nicer moment. And the wrist is not enough. I mean, often the marketing or the publicities for male watches were showing the wrist. But the watch has to fit the rings, the bracelets, the chains, the earrings, the rest. So you have to have the size up to be able to decide yourself. And often, I decide which watch I want to wear, and I dress according to the watch. That's my first start of the day across to the, So there is a lot of differences that needs to be addressed, and how you market, how you communicate, and how you talk about it, and how you influence. You may be less influenced by some and more influenced by others. And we see that female are responding a lot to design, and maybe less to technicalities, and there's less collectors clubs that allow female as well to have a good knowledge on the watches themselves, on the training, on the inside of the mechanical watches.
Hopefully we're doing a lot in the right way with our channel, because we are also trying to develop this direction. Where do you see the genuine innovation of the Swiss watchmaking industry? And where would you say it's more cosmetic? Like, where is the proper innovation? Where do you see it?
Well, there's disruptors. There's a lot of disruptors that disrupt in design. What we see, people want to have a talking piece. Maybe your first watch will be a watch that is recognizable. So you can say, oh, I have this and that brand. Oh, wow, you have maybe finally made it, or welcome to the watch world. But then rapidly, people like to talk about the watches. Oh, look at this one, this is a left-hand watch. Or look at this one, this is a one of a kind. Or look at this, So having a story behind it, and not only the brand, but the story is, I think, a good part. So watches are trying now to personalize or to make something different. And we see a lot of, as well, for female, new designs and different wearables. And it can be very different. When you speak about cosmetic, of course, colors have come up quite strongly these recent years as well, because it allowed watches to adapt, to be more visible, to make people happy with good night colors. That is more cosmetic, because you change the dial, you have a new model, and it's maybe just a bit more cosmetic. But then you have exceptional dials with marquetry and nice enamel and so on, which is more handcraft. That's really craftsmanship. And then, of course, the shapes. I mean, you even see for men, square watches recently have come up a lot. A lot of brands have come up with these watches, which is different than the more round or rectangular watches that we have seen historically. And then material. Watches have become lighter, recyclable, recycled, or recyclable, reusable. I mean, when sustainability was at its peak, you using bracelets from grapes, from apple skin, or from fishnets was, for example, very important. But we see that brands that are using recyclable material are still very fashionable as well. So I think there's a lot of new designers that try to break boundaries, but consumers first buy a traditional watch, maybe something that is more established, and then they dare more. But the risk is always with new independent brands. How long will they last? How can you warranty your watch? What is the investment value of that watch? So there's several criteria, and the life cycle of the buyer. When are you taking more risk or less?
You mentioned sustainability. How do you see this trend of sustainability, ESG, and so on? Is it still on the peak, or is it in a downturn?
How do you see it?
Looking at the diamonds, lab-grown diamonds, the prices are going down, and probably in the next 10 years they will further go down. Mm-hmm. So for me, it's a benchmark.
Yeah, we ask the question every year as well on why do you invest in sustainability and why do you do a sustainability report? Before it was it's compliance, I have to do it, and then it became a bit more the corporate strategy, because sustainability is the corporate strategy. And then there was the consumer demand as well. Nowadays, it's a given, it's a must. We have not even done a chapter on ESG anymore, because it's part of the company strategy, the net zero announcements. You have to just do it. You cannot not do it, and you cannot not issue a report or communicate around it, because the consumer takes it as a given. Will the consumer pay more? Will they select you because you do efforts in that space? Not necessarily anymore. Because when we ask which criteria do you base your purchasing activity on, the first answer is always, I choose my watch because of price value, then design, brand name. Sustainability was mentioned second in France, and then it's mentioned by a few countries like fifth. It's not really. The circularity is more interesting, because I have a product that can be used again and next generation. It's more to pass it to the next generation. But the sustainability impact, not really a buying criteria. But I think the brands have to do it, because if you're destroying the environment, you're not even an option anymore. So it has shifted a bit from pressure, regulation, to being the DNA of the main luxury houses and brands as a given.
Speaking about watchmaking industry, do you think there is a question which the watchmaking industry should ask more often, but it doesn't do it?
I think the industry is much closer to the consumers as they were before. We see as well some CEOs, they answer comments on social media, they call up people, they want to have conversations. There's much more consumer data, so they can react more. What I always hope is that there is more coherence and even more collaboration between the Swiss watch brands. I mean, we have a Swiss watch industry study because it's the Swiss watch industry. There was Basel, there was the SEHH, now we have Watches and Wonders already. Big auctions are happening here. But Dubai Watch Week, New York, Miami, there's a lot of places that come up. If we want, I think we should protect and be proud of the Swiss watch industry more and work more together, even more together. Because competition is there. Of course, new watch brands come up all the time, and there's other places to be and to go. And I think there's a lot to win to have a place that is the home of the watch industry. I mean, we concluded on passion. Why do people buy still Swiss mechanical watches because they're passionate about them, because there's passionate watchmakers, designers, experts that talk about it, and consumers that are collectioners. And that will perpetuate because you don't need a watch. You have to be passionate about it. And the storytelling and the history is important. And that mostly has happened in Switzerland. So I would like to see even more cohesion.
Yeah, 100% agree on this point because the international environment is changing a lot.
Yeah.
And my last question.
Yes.
Are you optimistic or conscious about the future of Swiss watchmaking industry?
I'm always optimistic by nature. There's challenges, but every time we say there's challenges are really difficult, oh my God, COVID will take years. Well, after 2 years, the volume were already recovered. You know, I mean, looking at the latest statistics, the US is almost flat from last year, and with everything happened and the tariffs and my God, it's flat. Yes, Asia is down, yes, but I mean, the UK is flat, India is still growing, Middle East is growing. There's always upsides, downsides, but the watch industry has shown being resilient. Of course, innovation, listen to your consumers, always put the client and the product in the center, be brilliant, be as Swiss-made as we are, but I think I cannot not be optimistic.
Great. So on this positive note, I would like to conclude this interview. It was our pleasure to welcome Karine on our channel. Please share your thoughts on the study, on our conversation, on the Swiss watchmaking industry. We would like to hear your voice. And as usual, we will answer also your comments and also forward them to Karine and her team in case you have specific questions. Don't hesitate and see you soon on our channel. Bye-bye.